After sending out the servant leadership nugget, I got a lot of emails asking a variety of questions about it, so I thought it would be great to just talk about it a little bit and answer any questions that you might have and hear my perspective on it, because I think it's a really important thing. And, as I say with many of the things that I talk about, this is just something that happened to work for me. It might not work for everybody. I don't claim to know everything. Just sharing with you guys stuff that has worked and my perspective on it. Clearly, there are a lot of different management styles that work well, that people are comfortable with. So I'm simply sharing what works for me. I'm not trying to preach or suggest that everybody should do this, but just wanted to share those things with you. And I think it really stems from my belief in servant leadership. Really comes from the fact that, some of you may not be familiar with me. I'm a real estate broker in New York City, investment sales broker. I've been a broker in New York for 40 years. For 26 of those years, I ran my own business, Massey Knakal, with Paul Massey. We started with two of us, grew it to 250 people, and 26 years and 46 days later, sold it for $100 million to Cushman & Wakefield. But I continued to broker in New York. I was with Cushman for 3.5 years. I was at JLL for about 6 years. And now I've started my own company again. And, still enjoy brokering as much today as I did when I first started out. And as of last week, closed sale number 2,338. Mm-hmm. So really love the business. And of the things, the Massey Knakal story is a really nice story to look back on. But I will tell you that aside from the sale price, aside from all the buildings we sold, aside from the dollar volume of sales that we achieved, and all those nice metrics that were part of what the story was, the thing that I am most proud of far and away is the fact that we created a culture that helped people, that built their self-esteem, that trained them, we invested in them, and we created an environment that people really were able to perform at levels that were probably higher than they even envisioned that they could perform at. And so today in the New York City investment sales space, there are 30 companies or divisions of companies in the investment sales business that are either owned by or run by people who learned the investment sale business at Massey Knakal. And I think that that's something that I'm extraordinarily proud of. And I think the reason that occurred is because of the type of management style that Paul and I implemented. And that was a management style of servant leadership. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit, and I'm happy to answer your questions. But essentially, servant leadership is a form of leadership that's probably been around a lot longer than the early 70s, when Robert Greenleaf, who is thought to be the father or founder of a modern servant leadership theory, the servant leadership movement. It's a non-traditional management style that basically is a process of motivating employees with a simple, scalable, repeatable process that basically creates a way to persuade people to do things because they want to, not because they have to. And not just to lead them, but to serve them by continually being a positive influence, by continually investing in them, by continually serving them, and to, as a leader, wanting to serve the folks that you work with first, as opposed to wanting, power, fame, influence, wealth. And certainly it's okay to want those things, but the primary objective should be to want to help those around you. So, the characteristics of servant leadership that help leaders both lead well and serve well are a variety of characteristics, and I think they include in investing and clearly investing in the people that you're leading. How do you invest in them? Three main ways. You invest dollars, you invest time, and you invest emotional support. And so when I look at those three things, I talk about the constant training that we had. Back in the old days when I started in the 80s, there were a lot of places that the training program was, hey, there's your desk, there's your phone, go to it, sell some buildings. We took it very, very significant, way further than that. We had initial success training. We had continued training. Our initial success training was that our folks weren't even to get on the phone to talk to a potential client until they passed the initial success training. And what was that? That was learning everything about your neighborhood. Or today, we had a geographic specialization back then. Today, I would say that product specialization is probably a better niche strategy than a geographic specialization is. But whatever your niche or your expertise is, become an expert at that. We had people really dig in and become an expert in their area by understanding every transaction, 3 years of transaction history, buyers, sellers, zoning changes that were affecting things, new developments in the area that were changing dynamics within the area. And then you had to go through a process of being able to underwrite a property. You had to fully understand the marketing program and the highlights of the 5 phases of the marketing program that we wanted to articulate to clients. And you actually had to pass a final exam, and that final exam was to pitch a group of sellers, and that group of sellers was made up of a couple of the partners of the company, and you had to pass the pitch. And if you didn't pass, you had to go back to the drawing board. You had 1 week to prepare and then come back and do it again. And you were able to fail twice, but you couldn't fail a third time. If you failed the third time, you unfortunately ended your affiliation with the company. But intensive initial training, and then continual training where we would get together on a weekly basis and talk about an aspect of the business. Maybe it was time management, maybe it was prospecting, maybe it was overcoming objections. And those sessions were generally led by someone who was a senior leader within the firm. And we also brought in outside speakers. We brought in professors from Columbia and the Wharton School and University of Arizona and Harvard. And folks came in and talked about various topics. It could be persuasion, or it could be business ethics, or it could be human behavior, or something. But we brought in a subject expert to talk about that particular thing that we thought would help our folks. And we want to do it for two things. One, it was really enjoyable to do that stuff, but we also wanted our people to know that we really care about their success and want to do everything possible to help them be successful. So training was a huge part of it. So the time investment, made the time investment through this training. Also the time to have folks build relationships with other people within the environment through social interaction. We had a number of social events. Could have been a company bowling party, or it was our summer picnic, or it was the holiday party, or a variety of things that we did. And every time we invited spouses, we invited children, and to our summer picnic, even pets were allowed. So we had a bunch of Massey Knakal dogs that came to the picnic. So that was done all for the purposes of having people interact with each other on a different level than being in the office. We always wanted to make sure that our HR people hired folks who were likable, because we said, gee, if you're interviewing somebody, even if their resume checks all the boxes and they look like they'd be a great fit, if you don't feel really comfortable with them and don't feel like you like them, maybe a potential client won't like them. So, but if you do like them, maybe the potential client will like them. And that likability is an important thing. So a lot of social interaction we did And that was a very important part of it. So there's some characteristics I want to talk about and within servant leadership that I think are important. And I'm certainly happy to open it up for questions and share more thoughts. But, listening is so important. If people don't feel like you are hearing their situation, hearing their ideas, you're not able to, they don't feel as if they are being heard, and you want to make sure that you're not missing out on something that could actually make the company better. If someone's having a problem with something, maybe there's a solution that'll make the company better. So listening is really, really important. I study studies on job satisfaction and job dissatisfaction, and a servant leader understanding that listening to the team is crucial for inspiring employees to do great work is so important, because when employees feel that their voice is being heard, they're 4.6 times more likely to feel empowered and are able to do their best work. So a huge, huge thing to make people feel as if they're being listened to. Another quality of the servant leader is empathy, to put yourself in the shoes of the person that you're listening to, hear what they have to say, and listening actively. There's something called active listening, where you really work hard to listen and understand what it is the other person is really saying. And that empathy really is great in terms of having positive effects on innovation, retention of people, engagement, and inclusivity. Have people feel, ask their opinion about a new initiative that the company's thinking about doing. And maybe they have a way to tweak it, a little twist on it or something, but empathetic listening is very important. The servant leader is also very aware. They have awareness, and it's very hard to be self-aware and know your strengths and your weaknesses. You have to work very hard at that. The natural inclination when people make up a list of their own strengths and weaknesses is there are many strengths, but not too many weaknesses on that side of the page. And interestingly, another study that was done showed that 95% of people think they're moderately or highly self-aware, but in actuality, only about 15% of people actually are. So very, very interesting stuff, but be aware of your strengths and weaknesses and try to have those strengths and weaknesses relate to how you're interacting with the folks that you're trying to lead. Another quality is persuasion, and being persuasive. In being persuasive, the servant leader will try to make rational arguments as to why folks should take a certain action. And rather than trying to lead by just saying, hey, this is the right thing to do, it's worked for everybody, you should do it, try to have people understand through rational support why they should be doing things. And, persuasion is such a big part of salesmanship. In fact, one of the guest speakers that we had, Dr. Bob Cialdini from the University of Arizona, is probably the leading authority on persuasion in the country. He came and spoke to us one time and just gave a really fantastic speech, but persuasion is certainly one of those characteristics. Another is conceptualization, and realizing that you have to explain that, what are the short-term goals and the big picture issues for the company. And, if people find meaning in their work, their performance is going to be so much better. So how does work have meaning? It's through the conceptualization of thoughts, principles, and realizing that to have the right perspective on why you're doing what you're doing is really important. So servant leaders play the long game and even think ahead and conceptualize problems that may not have even arisen yet, but may arise in the future. Another characteristic is stewardship, and that's all about working towards a greater good, demonstrating commitment to serving and meeting the needs of other people. One of the things that always occurred to Paul and I, we were always the first ones in the office. And several years after we met, many years after we had been open, 15, 16 years, we had a big floor. We had a couple of big floors at 275 Madison, but each floor is about 15,000 feet. And we'd be sitting there in the middle of the bullpen, just the two of us, and we'd often say, hey, what happens if nobody shows up today? Because our assets went up and down the elevator every day. And so the servant leader realizes that the people are really the most important assets that the company has, and you have to treat them as such. And, I think when it comes to servant leadership, one of the most important aspects of it is wanting the folks around you to do better than you do. And by encouraging them to do their job and understand how important their job is to the company. And, getting back to these studies that we look at that are related to job performance, job satisfaction. Interestingly, if you said, okay, if you do a study on job satisfaction, what's the number one thing that makes people feel like their job is satisfying? Most people are going to say, oh, the money. And money is almost never number one. Almost universally in these studies on job satisfaction, the number one thing that comes out is that people feel as if the job they're doing is an integral part of helping the company achieve its goals. And so we became aware of that and always made sure when we were interacting with our folks that they understood how important their job was to how the company was doing. And so this went from our very top producers down to the people that worked in the mailroom. And I remember we had this guy, Harold, that took such pride in getting our mailings out. And, back before email really became popular, we were sending out 3 million pieces of hard mail a year. And there were bulk rates and ways to do it that saved us money. And Harold took such pride in what he did. And we'd often go down and say, Harold, we just want you to know you're doing such a great job. We really love that you figured out how to do that bulk mailing to people outside New York. And, you saved us 2 cents a piece on these pieces. And that saved us $22,000 last year. Thank you so much. And the pride that he took in everything he did, even our receptionist, we would say to them, we've noticed what a great job you're doing greeting people. And that's so important because you are the first impression that people have when they come into our office. That you greet them warmly, you smile, you take their coat, you ask them if they want a cup of coffee or a glass of water. And that is such a great thing you're doing because it really creates a first impression that people have when they think of our company. So thanks for doing that. And you'd be shocked. For 2 months after we'd have that conversation with the receptionist, they'd greet everybody like it was their long-lost childhood friend walking in the door. And it really changed the way people performed. So, building up the self-esteem of people around you by giving them feedback is so important. And, it's said the cruelest thing you can do to someone is not give them any feedback at all. That people rather get negative feedback than no feedback. So it's important for the servant leader to build up those around them and encourage them to do better than even they thought they could do. And certainly you want to do better than you do, because the better everyone does in an environment that is collaborative, the results are much better for everybody. So those are the key points I wanted to hit on. And Mo, happy to open it up for any questions that could be about servant leadership or could be about anything. So I prefer not to talk about how horrible the Rangers played last night, but if you have to ask me about that, I'm happy to address that also.
We have the Blueprint Tour. Kenny, he says, is it easy to teach folks how to lead this way? How do you delegate this to other leaders in the team, particularly in the technical field like engineering or similar, where there might be, let's say, less of a gift of intuition and soft skills? And then he says, thanks, Bob.
Okay, well, that's a question. I don't know I can give you a great answer to that. I don't really understand the engineering business too well. But I think that, if you are the leader of an organization and you have other leaders under you or beside you, I think you treat them with your servant leadership approach and encourage them to do the same. And to understand that, someone rather feel appreciated and rather feel like everything they're doing is being recognized, heard, appreciated, helping the company get to where it wants to go, achieve its goals. And that pride in the job probably greatly outweighs how much money they're making. But I think that's something that comes from the top. You know, at MK, we had some producers that had fairly big teams. And I'll use as an example James Nelson, who now runs investment sales at Avis and Young here in New York. But James, I think, had got up to about 10 or 12 people on his team. And he ran his team with a servant leadership mentality. And I think that kind of was probably something that he saw Paul and I leading him that way. And he picked up on it immediately and ran his team that way. So I think you lead by example. You have to be cognizant that people will do what you do, not what you say. And so you have to walk the walk. And a lot of folks talk servant leadership, but don't walk the walk. If you say you're a servant leader and then, you know, you've been working with somebody for 4 years and you never gave them a single piece of feedback, you're not a servant leader. So you have to walk the walk.
So who modeled servant leadership for you?
Interesting. You know, I didn't really understand what servant leadership was until we started studying it early on in the MK days when we were looking to grow the firm and wanted to figure out the best way to do that. I think that, you know, my old boss at CB, Matt Ochowski, was a servant leader. Matt was always asking us, you know, what he could do to help us, how the company could be accretive to what we were doing, and, you know, wanted input from us. You know, hey guys, what's working in investment sales, what's not working, what could the company be doing differently or better? And I think that constant outreach to us made us feel like what we had to say was being heard. And that was probably the start of it there. Although we didn't realize it at the time, from studying it and understanding it, you got to see that those things that were being done, and I don't know if Matt had studied servant leadership or not, but he was implementing some of those principles, and maybe that was just natural to him, or maybe he had studied it, I don't know, but that was probably where I saw it for the first time.
All right, if we have any speakers that would like to jump on and ask BK a question about servant leadership, it is wide open right now. All you have to do is just pop on in, and I will put you in there. And so, BK, I am going to ask you, because I was watching the game last night as I was bowling. Were you there? I was trying to think you were there.
Unfortunately, I was at the game. I had a great time with a great client of mine, Gary Katz, and we were invited by Chuck Merritt from Merritt Engineering. Big shout out to Chuck. Thank you for that. But a tough one to watch. A very good game up until the third period, and then the wheels came off the bus. But only game one, so we have more than enough time to make up for it.
Okay, so we don't have anybody that's popped in yet, and I don't have any other questions that are on there. Real quickly, what kind of books would you recommend for servant leadership? What have you read?
I don't know if I read a book on servant leadership. I don't think on my suggested reading list, I don't know if I have a servant leadership book or not. I actually should know that, but I don't. So I have to look, but I'm happy to take a look through the library and see if I have something on it. I think I do have a book on servant leadership in my library, but I am in the process of moving to a new apartment, or a new house actually, moving out of an apartment, and a lot of stuff in storage, so I don't have access to my books, but I will follow up on that.
Awesome. All right, we have George Abro on the line. He's waiting to talk with you, BK.
Bob, how you doing?
Hey, George, how are you today?
Good, thank you. I had one for you. I've actually heard you say on a few different interviews how your perspective has changed, that you used to believe in specializing geographically, and with today's technology that, you know, that it makes more sense to specialize on your product, which most people do in our industry. But I wanted to ask if you still see, and even in some larger markets, that if it could still make sense to specialize geographically, especially considering that not too many people do that anymore, and if it could be a different type of differentiator versus what most people are doing.
Yeah, George, I think that it's really a combination. And let me explain it. It's the difference between being a generalist being someone who sells all types of properties, or in some smaller markets, you may sell properties and lease properties and manage properties because the market is so small that by necessity you have to do that. But assuming you're in a bigger market, rather than being a generalist and selling all types of properties, I believe focusing on one type of property has a huge advantage. And I'm not suggesting that if you are a hotel broker that you sell hotels all over the country. I think you want to have a product specialization, but importantly, you have to layer a geographic specialization on that. When you get your target market to the right size in terms of number, it should be, I think, one type of product and then within a geographic boundary. And it could be that you look at a product type and further dissect the product type into only Class A buildings or only buildings above a certain size or something to further qualify it, but then still draw a line on a map around where your area of specialization is so that you can say, hey, in North Milwaukee, there are X buildings of the type that I sell, and here's the average turnover rate, and here's the average price, and here's the average cap rate. And just to show that when you're able to articulate to a potential client that you have that specialization, that's really important because I think that shows value, shows commitment. I would venture a guess that the overwhelming majority of people in the industry don't know those numbers, and so it could be a big differentiator for you. But I think it's a combination of the product specialization within a set geography, not just taking a set geography and trying to do everything you possibly can of every type within that geography. And I think the reason for that is that the recognition that the two most important assets that a broker has are their knowledge and their time. We're always constantly trying to improve our knowledge base. But given that time is finite, we can't make any more of it. We have to use time more efficiently and effectively. And I'll give you as an example. Let's say the generalist last week closed 3 deals, a retail property, an office building, and an apartment building. And this week, the generalist is pitching an apartment building. Well, the apartment building owner wants to hear everything about the apartment building deal that was done last week, but really couldn't care less about the retail deal or the office deal. So 2/3 of the time that you spent working last week is not accretive towards getting this week's assignment. But had you sold 3 apartment buildings last week, when you're pitching the apartment building this week, 100% of the time that you worked last week was accretive towards getting this week's assignment. So there you've created time. You've created more time because you're using your time more effectively. And that's kind of the theory behind it, I think, that because time is so finite and we don't have any more time, that if you spend all your time working on one product type, that 100% of what you do all day long is helping you get the next one. And that's the way I think you are creating time, leveraging time, making more time. And that's the thought behind the product specialization as being much more of an important ingredient today than the geography. Although I think you have to have a geographic focus within that product specialization.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
All right. We are coming up to 5:40 Eastern. Do we have anybody else that wants to pop on and ask BK a question about servant leadership or anything else? You can speak now or forever hold your peace. Hold on. I think we actually have a comment that I might have. We have one. My question is, this is from JB. He says, my question is, how do you address the unfortunate situation when a client takes advantage of your servant nature? Great question.
Well, actually the servant leadership I've always looked at it as more of an internal management style as opposed to a style for managing clients. Clearly we are in the service business, so we're servicing clients, but can I tell you that I've provided market reports and market data and BOVs for some owners for probably 40 years and never gotten a piece of business from them? Absolutely. Are they taking advantage of me? I don't feel that way at all. I feel that what our business is a probability-based business. right? I know that, in Manhattan, south of 96th Street, the average turnover rate over 40 years has been 2.6%. And on average, probably half the stuff that goes on the market sells. So at any one time, 5% of the total stock is on the market. So if you're calling on 20 properties, there's a chance that one may be for sale. That's the reality of the market. All we try to do by virtue of having better systems, more accurate lists, doing things more frequently to interact with people, we're just trying to increase the probability that we'll be top of mind. But nothing is 100%. And would I get annoyed if, I keep doing all these things for, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, and doesn't get anywhere? I'm not getting annoyed. That's part of the process. All I'm trying to do is increase my probability. So I think from an owner's perspective, it would be nice if they really felt you were adding value and you kept giving them market information if it came back to you in some way. But the expectation that every time you're behaving that way, it's going to definitely lead to a piece of business, I think, is unrealistic. So I think you have to have realistic expectations in terms of what your approach is likely to do. Just like with servant leadership, it doesn't work with every single employee, but I think it works the majority of the time, and again increases the probability of success. And that's all we really can try to do. I always say you can control your effort and your attitude. You can't really control what other people are going to do, and just do your best and increase your probability, and you'll end up getting more wins than you would have otherwise.
All right. We had a request to speak from Mal Lease Up, and I tried to invite you to be a guest speaker, and then Twitter decided that it was going to do whatever. So that being said, Mal Lease Up, if you'd like to speak, it's your opportunity right now. So it doesn't look like they're able to pop on. Anybody else have any questions? Request to speak right now, we'll get you on. BK, what's up next for you?
What's up next for me? I don't know. Well, I got to sell some buildings, so I have to jump on a couple of calls, get some more calls done today. And this is great. I hope that you may have gotten a nugget or two out of this. Hopefully it's worth your time. We will be coming out with a lot more information on the Knakal affiliate program in the coming week or 10 days. So be alert for that. We had our first call this past weekend, went really well. We already have 2 folks who are on the call hopefully doing a transaction with each other. So hopefully it's starting to bear fruit already. And so I encourage you to give that a look. And if there's anything I can do to help anyone out there, please shoot me a DM, an email, call me on the cell, whatever you like. And I wish everybody the best of luck.
All right, BK, real quick, Rod did send a message. I just got one from him. He said, how does your servant leadership approach lead to selling more buildings? Specifically, what traits of being a servant leader apply to brokerage? That's a fantastic question.
Great question, Rod. Look, how do you sell more buildings? Because if the people in your ecosystem are more productive and doing more business, that trickles down to everyone within the environment. So if you are encouraging people to do a better job and increasing the likelihood that they're going to do business, think about it. If you had 20 people at a company and everybody was doing 2 deals a year, you would have a certain level of activity within that office. If everybody was doing 20 deals a year, everyone would be doing better. And if everyone was doing 50 deals a year, everyone would be doing better still. So to the extent that approach leads people to work harder, be more creative, be more innovative, come up with new ways to do things, get more listings, create more of a positive influence in the office, that's just going to lead to a better environment for everyone. And I think that the environment in which you work is really, really important to your approach, to your willingness to go the extra mile. And, when you're in an environment that's very positive like that, leads to great things. So hope that answered your question.
All right. We have one on the thread that says, what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced while trying to implement servant leadership in your organization? Is it realizing the potential of members of the team and making them work to their best potential?
Yeah, well, realizing folks' potential, I think there sometimes were frustrations when we knew someone had the potential but just wasn't giving it the effort that we thought they should have. And sometimes there was a wake-up call needed to have an honest conversation about, why that performance wasn't what we thought it would be or could be or should be. But look, this stuff is all hard. Nothing is really easy, and it requires a lot of elbow grease and a lot of effort. But, there certainly are challenges all along the way, and there are challenges also when you are in the process of doing deals. It's one of the reasons why we had our management team was strictly paid managers. They were not player coaches, because when you're busy making deals, it's sometimes hard to think, oh, well, I have to make this call to try to get this deal done, but I have to try to help, my colleague over here. And when, a player coach is often going to defer to getting the deal done as opposed to helping the person sitting next to them. So, that's a challenge. That was a challenge for us, because while we were trying to be leaders, we were also producers, but we wanted our management team to help us with the implementation of the servant leadership management style. And those folks were just paid managers that did nothing but manage the troops. So it's like with anything, the challenge is always in finding the right balance and finding out what works best for you. But certainly this stuff is not easy. There are a lot of challenges with it. Nothing's perfect. Nothing works all the time. You just have to try to do your best.
Mike Malloy asks, he says, do you have any thoughts on how traditional leaders can navigate the hybrid work environment and what they can do to adapt to the challenges of leading, nurturing staff who are working remotely, i.e. remote work can hide a lot of stuff that's visible in an office?
Yeah, Mike, that is a great question, and I don't have an answer for it. I think that, one of the downsides of the whole hybrid work and working from home is that it is really, really difficult to create a corporate culture that you want to have. It's difficult to train people. I think that particularly for young people, I think they probably learn more by osmosis, just by being in the environment and overhearing conversations and, getting a cup of coffee in the kitchen and you overhear somebody talking about a deal and you learn something. You don't get in the way of that stuff on scheduled Zoom calls. And I think in terms of being a leader, and I mentioned listening and being a good listener and being empathetic, unless you're really interacting with that person personally, very, very difficult to have the same quality relationship. So I think there are a number of challenges that hybrid work and work from home creates for management and also for the learning curve of the employee themselves. I think the young people, over the last 4 years have been at a very, very significant disadvantage from not being in the office every day, to their detriment. And their learning curve is probably a lot flatter because of it. And you bring up a great point. I don't know how to solve that other than getting folks in the office. And I mentioned how accretive all of our social events were to the vibe in the office when you feel like you're working with your buddies as opposed to working with a coworker. It's a very, very different vibe. And we got a lot of that positive energy from the social gatherings that we had, where people could interact with each other in a non-work environment. That was really helpful for relationship building. And, unless you're getting together, it's really tough to do that. So I think you bring up a great point, and I think it's really, really challenging to implement a management style like this.
All right, our last speaker is Miles Marino. Miles, you are up.
All right, great, thanks. Thanks for putting on this kind of Q&A today. So my question was, what are some of the challenges and nuances that you have observed when it comes to somebody coming into an already established organization and trying to take this servant leadership approach compared to somebody who is, CEO or founder and has been able to set up this philosophy from the top since day one? What are the challenges and nuances there?
Yeah, well, that's another great question. I think when you are a new person coming into a new environment, you have to kind of really get the lay of the land, take everybody's temperature and figure out what's going to work and what's not. I think a lot of this whole thing has to do just with the way that you interact with people, how you talk to them, how you relate to them. And so that probably is not going to change that much, but the way you lead really depends where you are within that new environment that you went into. Are you a senior manager? Are you a partner? Are you just running a division? Are you, are responsible only for a couple of people? I think it really depends what position you're actually in and, determining the best approach given where you are and what your circumstances are. But it's very challenging. You go into a new environment, and one thing I can say from experience, if you're in a new environment, don't go into it halfway. Don't go into it 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Either decide I'm going all in and I'm 100% in, I'm bought into this and this is the way I'm going to do things, or get out. But don't go halfway. Halfway doesn't work well for anybody. So I think you have to kind of take a look around, see what's what, figure out where you fit in, and do the best you can to try to implement the things that you think will work best for those around you.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, BK, that was it. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, anybody, you can always get me through my email. My email is bk@bkrea.com. So bk@bkrea.com, or always feel free to call me on the cell, shoot me a text, 917-509-9501, and happy to interact with you.
All right, thanks everybody. We appreciate you joining us today on Servant Leadership, and hopefully we will see you again in the future.
Thanks, everyone. Best of luck to everyone. Mo, thank you so much for being a great co-host again.
You're welcome.
Bye.